Welcome to the Conversation Lab. I'm Don Schaefer. If democracy begins in conversation, then we need to nurture a culture where ordinary people like us routinely talk about those things that help us understand each other, whether it's about climate, race, religion, gender, or politics. When we're trying to make sense of our city and the world we live in, every question comes with a set of assumptions about the nature of ourselves and our place in a larger world. The Conversation Lab provides a safe place to talk about some of those things. This program is produced by CFRO-FM in Vancouver. It's available on air and online on various platforms, and we appreciate the help of Vancouver's community groups. You know, it doesn't seem that long ago when I first saw the Powder Blues Band playing the bars and clubs in Vancouver. I can still remember playing their first album on the radio. What a thrill. That's almost 40 years ago. And I was really happy to see the Tom Lavin and the Powder Blues Band are doing a fundraiser for Co-op May 15th at the Rio Theater. Assuming everything works well today, we have Tom Lavin on Zoom. It's really good to see you again. I can see from Zoom that you're an avid reader. You got lots of books.
Yeah, I'm constantly reading stuff.
So what's your latest book? Any favorites you can share?
Oh, gosh. I really got into Karl Ove Knausgaard, who I think is going to win the Nobel Prize for Literature. He wrote a 6-volume set. He's a Norwegian. Knausgaard, Knausgaard. He wrote a 6-volume set called My Struggle, which you start reading it and literally you crawl inside his body and look out his eyes and live his life. And it's so embarrassingly honest. The powers of self-observation are so keen that if you get into it, to me, it was absolutely life-changing experience. He changes nothing. So he uses his real names and real places and all his real relationships with his various wives and his kids and his parents. It's very, very heavy. My Struggle in 6 volumes. And so that the volume 6 is like, I think, 1,200 pages. So it's a pretty dense read. But I simply couldn't wait for each volume to come out. Promised Land I read, which was Obama's latest presidential memoir. That comes in 2 volumes, and I'm anxiously awaiting the second volume. I was refreshingly surprised in how little he whitewashed and how honest and unegotistical it came across. I mean, sure, there were a few incidences where I thought he may have
embellished.
But for the most part, I thought it was very insightful. Values has totally blown my mind. What's his name? Mark. He was born in Yellowknife, and he later became the head of the Bank of England.
Yeah, Mark Carney.
That's a really heavy and deep book that just now came out. That I read the whole thing, and the writing style is so condensed that I would have to read a paragraph and then think about it for 15 minutes before I go on. But it's mostly about global economics, which is a complex subject. And I guess the Bank of England was pretty well at the top of being able to ballast the planet. And you start having a different worldview in terms of how bank policies affect people at every single level of society. And he was mostly talking about ethics and morality on the highest level and what economics really is and what should be motivating people. But that book caused a lot of questions in me too, because I couldn't wonder, I really wondered with a guy that was so absolutely bright, a Rhodes Scholar, and literally came up from Yellowknife to be self-educated and be one of the brightest guys on the planet. I wondered if he was writing, it seemed idealistic and altruistic and maybe a little too hopeful. And I was wondering if he was writing it in hope or if he was writing it in naivety, which was hard to understand. So I'm sort of looking for someone else who can get into it that I can talk to about it, because it left a lot of questions unanswered. So that's what I do. That's what I read for myself. Now, my son, the last 4 or 5 years, I've read to him every night, and I because I was doing that, I revisited all the classics, a lot of dystopian stuff. So I read like Slaughterhouse-Five and Of Mice and Men and Animal Farm, To Kill a Mockingbird, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Catcher in the Rye, the standard, the usual suspects, Fahrenheit 451, Brave New World, yeah, stuff like that. And so that was interesting. I just reread Of Human Bondage by Somerset Maugham. The first time I read it when I was a young man, I thought, what a sellout. Why didn't he go on his worldwide trip? Why did he get married and sell? And as I read it for the second time, I thought, good move. So,
it's funny how our perceptions and our thoughts change over the years.
Yes, things have changed.
So you're definitely keeping intellectually engaged.
Well, I mean, what I really like is I used to think my son was bright. It was just parental pride. But when the tests started coming in, he was testing 99th percentile. So he's way brighter than me. But yeah, intellectually, I mean, we have lots of talks about, free space energy and quark theory and cool math stuff. We love things like Mandelbrot set and Koch curves and fractals and those sort of mathematical enigmas. So he's marvelous. He's like my best friend and my intellectual companion these days.
How old is he?
He's 14 and a half.
Okay, that's fabulous.
His brain is much faster than mine.
That's funny. But what a gift.
Yeah, it's great. And he has the other side too, where he just came to me one day and he said, I need a heavy bag. I said, why? And he says, I feel like punching something. And so I got him a heavy bag. And then he said, well, I'm interested in martial arts. And, the concept of a true master is an interesting thing. And I have in my life always tried to think that I could recognize one if I saw one. And I've seen very few. I met a couple guys maybe in my entire life that I considered masters. And I'm not talking about metaphysical, occult, spiritual garbage. I don't believe in the Easter Bunny or the Tooth Fairy. I'm talking more about just mastery of anything that results in mastery of everything. It doesn't matter if you're growing carrots or chopping barbecue. Master. And so we went to I looked up on the internet and they said, it was a local community center, Kerrisdale Community Center. Said, oh, here's a guy that teaches kickboxing and jujitsu. Had a Persian name. I said, let's go check him out. And, he's maybe 5'6", maybe 50 years old. And we watched a class and I knew in an hour, this guy was a real life master. He hardly said anything. And everything he said was on two different levels, minimum. It was all double entendre, spiritual and physical. And I thought, I left there and I thought, well, my son will never recognize this guy's a master. And he didn't. And I thought, can I believe my eyes? So I went on the internet and looked him up. And it turns out that he's 5th degree black belt in 7 different disciplines. And that including Iaido, which is samurai sword fighting, which is basically ceremonial. It's like a tea ceremony, only physics. And so Ruben said, okay, I'll try it. At the end of the class, I looked at the guy and I said, it was an honor watching you. And he said, oh, I see you have eyes, or something like to that nature. And he said, age is no deterrent. I think you should join the class with your son. And so I did. And so the last 6 months, 7 months, I've been doing kickboxing with the master, which is hard on your body, but it's fun. And Ruben's doing extremely well at that. And he decided to, in addition to that, this guy teaches jujitsu. And so Ruben goes to jujitsu, but that was like a bridge too far for me. So he does that by himself, but we do kickboxing together.
What a great experience.
Oh, yeah, it's fantastic.
No, good for you. I mean, you get to do something with your son, which is a real gift, but it's got to be good for you.
Well, I had the targets on Wednesday night, and it was like jab, cross, shuffle, right kick, and I had to take his punches. And my shoulders were talking to me pretty hard to loosen up the grip on these targets, or you're going to put one out.
It's interesting for me because we can share some of the same perspectives, at least in distance. We started our conversation talking about the early days of Chicago and coming to Vancouver. And now we're in the present and talking about our lives, our relationships with our kids, the things we think and feel. And there's quite a journey from 1969 to 2022. There's a lot of stories in there. How are you feeling?
I can't believe that, inside I still think I'm 17. Sure. I mean, there's aches and pains. It's not as easy to get my socks on as it was when I was 17, but everything's working. I'm shocked. I never thought I'd see 30, frankly.
Yeah, I wonder what that is, because I never thought I'd get past 25, and yet, here we are.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think a lot of it is just, the cards you pull.
Yeah. So I'm curious, how come you decided to do a benefit concert for Co-op?
Well, gosh, I mean, I love Peter Thompson. He was the hardest working, most idealistic guy in the world, really balanced. And he was there all the early days. Man, that guy was putting in 18 hours. And, for the love of it, I'm quite sure. He's since moved back to the States and gone on to all sorts of other different things. But, and I don't even know why, because I didn't really go out of my way to try and get Co-op Radio's attention. But I guess at the beginning of Powder Blues, we were sort of a bit of a thing about town. People were talking about us. And they just somehow got a hold of me and said, what would you think about a live broadcast? And so we used to play that joint on 4th Avenue at Stevens called Rohan's Rock Pile, which was, everybody played there. I mean, you must have heard it. I mean,
absolutely.
Alexis was there, and Jerry Doucette was there, and of course Lindsay from Prism, and all. I mean, pretty well every band that ever came out of Vancouver from that point played at Rohan's Rock Pile, and so they would come down there and do live broadcasts, CFRO. That in those days it was 95.6. I think.
Yeah.
I remember saying that many times. And we did broadcast from there. I think we might have even done a broadcast from Izzy Walters or at the Penthouse, we did or the Garage or the Body Shop. I mean, all those places. They did a lot of live broadcasts with us in the very early days. I think even before the first album. And I think that helped spread the word about what we were doing. Because at the time, blues was not really a very popular musical genre. That was the days of the, 5-man car going across town bus, we dress alike and play top 40.
What was your relationship with radio like in those days?
I think a lot of my path in life came from Buddhist beginner's mind. Somehow I instilled in myself that anything was possible and that a contract was anything two people could agree upon, and that the very best way to approach anything was out of assuming nothing to begin with. I had a spiritual experience like that with Alvin Jones, who was a very famous seminal jazz drummer and influenced the world of music in a very deep level. I was down in Gastown, and there was this joint. It wasn't a pig and whistle, but it was one of those horrible little joints there, maybe around 1970, and it said Alvin Jones is going to be there that night. And I thought, why? What on earth? I had no idea. So I went in at the appropriate time, and there was like one other person in the club, and there was a drum set and nothing else. And I just sat there, bought a drink, and sat there, waited for something to happen. And this guy came in, and he was looking at the drum set like he'd never seen it. And he was curious about it. And then he went up to the drum set, and I thought to myself, you better keep your hands off those drums, man. Those are Alvin Jones's drums, and you're going to get in deep trouble. Then he picked up a stick, and I thought, somebody's going to come out of the back room and beat him up. And then he tapped a cymbal and just turned his head and listened to it. He tapped another, and he tapped a drum and another drum, and then he sat down at the stool. And this was over a period of 5 minutes.